Things have really calmed down out there over the last 24 hours, but don't let that lull you into a false sense of complacency. More snow and cold are on the way for many of us. In fact, they're already here for some of us. And we're going to take a look at just where those flakes are flying and who is going to break records over the next couple of days. Several more winter storms are in the pipeline, including one for my neck of the woods down here in the southeast. We're going to take a look at that. Not going to do any sort of fancy cuts or edits today. I'm just going to talk to you. I've got several interesting things to show you, and we're going to take a look at that first winter storm that's coming in across the southeast, and I'm going to show you why it may or may not be a big deal. And then what follows on its heels might be something a little bit better for us to sink our teeth into. So we're going to look at a couple of things around that today, and we're going to show you what the pattern holds over the next couple of weeks too. Now, we're going to start here. Look at this. This is our alerts map, and you can see winter weather advisories, even winter storm warnings out here for parts of the the eastern Four Corners region, Colorado, New Mexico, particularly in the higher elevations. And then we've got some lake effect snow that's going to be affecting places like Jamestown and Buffalo up into Syracuse and Watertown. So we've got winter weather advisories up in those areas. As a matter of fact, you can see here out in toward Denver, Pueblo, down toward Colorado Springs, Red River, looking at snow. The higher elevation is going to get the lion's share of the snow. Over to Wolf Creek Pass, for example, you may get up 14, 15 inches of snow. And over here toward Rye and Levada Pass, you're going to see more than a foot potentially. So down here across Pueblo and back up into Colorado Springs, look for more in the order of 3 to 4. 3 to 6, and a little bit less in Denver. This came out. This is the latest forecast from the National Weather Service. So definitely seeing some flakes. See those winter storm warnings continue through the nighttime hours. And up here in the northeast, across over in the lee of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, look for snow. Dunkirk, Springville, looking at maybe 3-4 inches of snow. Buffalo, a couple inches, not out of the question, of course. Rochester over to Fulton. There you can see a little bit more. We've got lake effect snow banding that'll set up, and where those bands are persistent, that's where you get the highest snowfall rates, as you know. So look for maybe 4 to 6, somewhere in this band from Sodus over to just southwest of Utica, and then up toward Watertown. Another band will set up here, heading on up into the upstate and on into Canada eventually. And so look for several inches, maybe as much as 8 inches somewhere in the Watertown vicinity. So enjoy the flakes flying yet again up there. Big lake effect snow season underway. Now, this is the European model, and I've got the big picture view out. We're going to zoom in on the next winter storm that's going to affect the southeast here coming up in just a minute, but I want to show you something on the big picture first. So as we're going out to tomorrow night, look at this, 12Z Thursday. This is tomorrow morning. We'll go through the day tomorrow. Big high pressure and control in the middle of the country, bringing in cool air from Canada. There's a little system. You can see it getting its act together. These systems just don't form out of nowhere. I'm going to show you why it's forming and what is making this come together and why we need to pay attention to certain things. And so there's that high pressure. I always want to see high pressure in tandem with or preceding the storm, and this one is doing so. As a matter of fact, it is warp speeding out of here to the east, and it will be in place presenting a easterly and northerly flow out of the northeast where there's snow and keeping that air cool, coming down into the southeast. We see this in a lot of times in the wintertime. This is cold air wedging. Air flows around this high pressure and wedges up against the mountains here. Here are the mountains like this, and there they are. It's terrible mountains, but you can see the kink in the lines. That's indicative of high pressure at the surface and cool air coming in out of the north with that wedging signature. So that air is going to be cool, and it's going to be kind of dry preceding this. So there'll be some opportunity for evaporative cooling as this moisture gets on in here. And as you can see, the European is fairly excited about a little bit of snow across North Carolina, Virginia border up into Virginia. It's actually one of the northernmost models as it amps the southern system up just enough to throw some moisture up north into Virginia toward DC and Philly, Dover, and then toward maybe New York City. You get a few flakes flying if the European is right. Some of the other models, a little bit flatter than that, so not really looking at too much going on there. And then eventually more winter weather in the pipeline potentially. We'll get into that in a second, but show you this. This is our energy map. We look at this a lot of times to understand what's going on and what we're dealing with, whether or not we've got a big major winter storm on our hands or just kind of a piddly kind of nuisance winter weather advisory type event. This map can show you that, and I'll show you how. In this case, we've got a lobe of the PV up here. That's our polar vortex, tropospheric polar vortex up here in Canada. This is swinging through this way, okay? That's helping to drive that high pressure and lay down that cold air. Then we've got our energy here in the southern stream. We'll call it the southern stream, sort of a quasi-split flow. But we've got a southern piece of energy, and it is moving this way. And you can see that reflected by the nice kind of U shape to this piece of energy. And out ahead of this, where you get your lift, that's where you get your rain, snow, if it's cold enough. And as this piece moves east as well, watch what happens to it. Does it stay kind of a big consolidated package, U form, or does it get kind of flat and stringy? Well, look what's happening. It's kind of getting flat and stringy here. What's happening is this piece of the polar vortex presses to the south. You see these height lines here? I'm going to be dramatic about this. They're coming together like this. And where they're kind of fanned out here and coming together, the flow is in this way. It is sort of a pancaking flow to the height lines, and when this piece of energy tries to get into that, it's going into it, it's getting squished like this. That is not good for a big, robust storm, okay? So that's not what you want to see if you want a big, big winter storm, this thing getting squashed to death and flattened out. The European is actually holding it together long enough to keep a southwesterly flow, producing moisture out of the Gulf and presenting that into the southeast and helping it to overrun some of that cold air that's laid down by this PV lobe. And eventually you get a little bit of winter weather associated with it. See, it still comes through. It's not completely gone, and you get a little bit of a sort of convective type, I don't know, a signature to some of the vorticity down here. But that's what happens. And then there's another piece in the pipeline kind of coming through later on. As we get on down the road a little bit farther, this one might actually have a chance to do something a little bit better because it is, there's cold air up here being laid down by another short wave. And then this wave looks a little bit more intact and strong, and the height lines are not so tightly packed. So that is a little bit of a lesson of energy. Now, I'm going to show you what happens as it all kind of gets together here. This is midnight Friday, so this 12 a.m. Friday, and you start to see precipitation breaking out in North Carolina. Look at this, up into Virginia, across the border. I've switched over to the NAM. We're starting to get into the NAM's range a little bit. We're at the end of the NAM's range, so, you know, we're going to watch this unfold, but the NAM presents snow up into Virginia, produces sleet and even some freezing rain back here across northern North Carolina. Not a big deal for anybody, but certainly would cause some slick spots on the roads and have flakes that would be pretty to come down. And then what happens? You get this sort of more of a rain shield as the day wears on. We get into 3 p.m. and you know, high pressure is kind of scooted out already, so we're left with sort of a stale air mass. And what's happening is here at the surface, we start midnight. Look at these temperatures running. Nobody's really below freezing according to the NAM. Now, some of the other models are a little bit cooler than this, but look, we going in toward midnight, 1 a.m., 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We wake up at 7. We've got cooler air coming in. Why is that? Well, coming out of the north for one thing, plus the flows out of the north at the surface, plus there's evaporational cooling going on. Dew points are lower than freezing, and so as the rain starts to fall into it, it cools the atmosphere off. Evaporation is a cooling process, just like when you step out of the shower and you're all kind of cool. It's because water's evaporating off your skin, and you need that in the summertime especially. That's why you get those humid days in the summer, and it stays just real hot, and you have all these heat warnings because you have to take breaks and stay cool. Can't cool off when it's humidity so high. And anyway, that's what you get, and then you get a bounce back of the temperatures as the day wears on. And there you dew points. See, you dew points up here, midnight, looking at the 20s across much of North Carolina. Those just continue to funnel in from the northeast, so you get a little bit of a feed of dry air. And then eventually, as we get on towards 7 a.m., things will start to moisten up a bit. And you see dew points here going up to 32, 28, things like that. Look at that. You going up into the afternoon, dew points are kind of coming up now as the air mass gets saturated. There's no more dry air being advected in because the high pressure is gone. Voila, you're left with a stale air mass that starts to go above freezing, and everybody turns to rain, particularly here in the southern Piedmont, northern Piedmont up into Virginia. You may hang on to whatever's falling, could stay frozen quite a bit longer than that. And as a matter of fact, if we take a look at snowfall, the NAM actually puts the snowfall footprint across the border, just north of the border, up here in and around Richmond and down toward the border, toward Danville, looking at about an inch or two. The blue area is about 2 inches. So really looking at not a ton of snow for anybody. As a matter of fact, if we take a look at sleet, it puts sleet up here from the northern foothills across the northern Piedmont, across to Virginia, maybe looking at 1.1 to 0.23 inches. 0.2 now. This is a tenth of an inch to 3/10 of an inch of sleet, and freezing rain. It's got a little bit more in the way of freezing rain up here as well, but really with temperatures right around 32, we're not looking at a big icing event by any stretch of the imagination. If we take a look at the RGM has the same sort of similar footprint, but it puts more of the heavier snow back in toward the mountains of North Carolina, up here toward, you know, Boone, Blowing Rock, and up into West Jefferson and across the border toward Wilkesboro and again Roxboro, picking up some snow, maybe 2-3 inches of snow. If the NAM is, or if the the RGM is right. It's a little bit colder and holds on to that a little bit longer. And it actually has a fairly good sleet signature. A lot of places picking up 2 to 3/10 of an inch of sleet across much of North Carolina. I think this might end up being a little bit overdone given some of the dew points that we're seeing, but we're still a couple of days away, so we'll watch it. Not excited about freezing rain, and I wouldn't be too excited about a lot of freezing rain either in this setup. And then finally, looking at the this was the rapid refresh. This was not the RGM that I just showed you, by the way. I said RGM, I meant rapid refresh. That's the one that's replacing the NAM. That's the model replacing the NAM. This is the RGM, and there it has its footprint up here a little bit farther to the north. So sort of runs everything a little bit farther to north. North Carolina doesn't get very much of anything at all. A little bit of sleet maybe, but not much in the way of snow, and certainly not much freezing rain with this as well. So that is the system upcoming. We're kind of teetering right on a knife's edge of getting enough moisture in while keeping the cold air in. And too much of a cold press, you get no moisture. Too much moisture, too much of an amped up southern system, it scours out all the cold air. We just don't have a great setup for a high pressure in place. But the next system could be a little bit better. As a matter of fact, if we take a look here at how that plays out, I'm going to show you the GFS, then I'm going to show you the European as well, and how that kind of plays out. Look at that. So there's our first system. The GFS is a global model. Don't expect it to get too fancy and cute with the sleet and the rainfall or the freezing rain and the snow lines and all of that. It just sort of paints a bunch of snow here for the first system, and I think that's a bit overdone. And some rain falling across the southeast, and then we get on out towards Sunday and into Monday. That sort of abates, but a new piece of energy is coming in. We saw that a while ago. High pressure building in toward the Great Lakes. That's a 1036 high, and it starts to filter in right as the system starts to crank up a little bit along the coast. So we don't have one of those situations where it's getting squashed to death this time. But the cold air from the previous high is kind of scoured out, and we need to get this high here to come in time to really pull down cool air before the storm cranks up and leaves us. So it's going to be a timing thing, but that's not a bad setup. Just a couple of ticks off from being something a little bit more, and in any event, that low pressure kind of winds up. The trailing energy continues to produce a little light snow as that high works in. That high would be a good enough strength to really produce a decent winter storm here. So we could be talking about a moderate event toward the early portion of next week, okay, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in there. We'll watch it. The European, however, is not as excited about it. The GFS just continues to show cold air, more clippers coming in across the border, bringing snow to the Great Lakes up into the northeast, and then eventually we see that clipper train sort of rolling, and then it wants to ridge the east, and then we get back to this cutter pattern again, and then way out in time you get another big low cranking up going to the Great Lakes, bringing more winter weather for you guys, and then again back into the Midwest and Northern Plains into the Great Lakes. That's the GFS operational. It starts to lose skill out after 7 days, really after 5 days, but that's what we're looking at from a GFS standpoint. The European, not quite as excited about that second storm. You see what happens here? Keeps it very flat and low amplitude, and the little piece of energy in the northern branch just doesn't quite connect to it, so we don't get any response of precipitation back north. The high pressure is a little bit late coming in, and so we're not looking at a big winter storm on the European. I'd much rather have the European on my side, but again, we're just a few ticks away from something happening here, so we'll keep our eyes on that. Definitely keep our eye on the ball there, because there is potential in the pattern. There's your Clipper Fest, one through the Great Lakes as we go on out toward day 9. That's the 12th of December. More cool weather, and it just keeps the cool train flowing for much of the run until you get way on out here into the end of the run, and then it starts to warm up the south. But that's the European for you. Here's the big kind of big picture view of the European. And we're going to take a look at it just to see it. The upper air, the mid-level anomaly map. There you go. Big EPO ridge up here pulling cold air out of the Arctic, and a big trough in the east. And look at this. This is one thing that I'm happy to see. I'm happy to see some things. I'm not happy to see others. I'm happy to see that. That's a Greenland block. And if we can get that to kind of to migrate south, it helps to push this big PV lobe to the south as well. And if we want snowstorms in the east, we need cold air to work with. And this ridge off the west coast, I'd like to see it get a little closer to the coast, and this EPO ridge a little bit more to the north of Alaska too. And as we sort of roll this around, you see it sort of oscillate around the whole United States and Canada flooded with cool air, blocking over the top. That is good. We're talking about Sunday now, so we're not too far out in time. We get on out toward day 5 and day 6. Look at this. Cool in the east, still got the big blocking signature that's helping to keep this locked into place. EPO up here, flat ridge out west, still flat, and you got this big wave train coming in through British Columbia. I'd like to see this close off and ridge all the way up there and knock this mess off. That would give a storm a chance to amplify and blow up along the East Coast. But in any event, we're looking at clippers and clippers, and finally, maybe out in time, we start to see this ridge poke up again. This is 216 hours, so December the 12th, where the GFS is really starting to warm us up. The Europeans cooling it off. And then we get out here toward day 10, big ridge here in the Intermountain West up through the Rockies and cool across the north, and blocking all over the place in the Arctic. That's part of the stratospheric warming process that we've seen. That PV up there is getting stretched, and that's helping to create an opportunity for blocking and push cooler air to the south and buckles the jet stream, kind of like what I told you a couple of videos ago when we were talking about the stratospheric polar vortex. And so we get on out to the end of the run, and of course, the European wants to warm everything up. All these models have been wanting to warm us up toward the end of the run because they're not really seeing tropical forcing as good as I'd like for them to be able to see it. But take heart, I think that's wrong, and I'll show you why. Here is our friend, the MJO. Look at this, my friends. The MJO, the European model, the latest version, takes the MJO in here today through the next couple of days, and then just kind of kills it, kills the pulse and the circle of death, we call it, as the pulse starts to, the wave of convection starts to die out, but it keeps it meandering around here in phase 8. That's really good, and that would be really good. Whenever the this hasn't updated the kind of the weekly for the next month. That one hasn't updated today. I'm interested to see what it shows, but it's been showing a lot of phase 8 activity here into phase 1, phase 2. Those are good, and we're not seeing it blast over here into the warm phases, so I'm not really enthusiastic about a big warm up anytime soon. And so to that end, check this out. Over the next couple of days, we're looking at low temperature records potentially being set all throughout here in the Corn Belt and up into parts of the Midwest tonight. And then on Friday, the low temperatures are starting to be threatened as well up here into the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. Even some record low highs. Look at that. We're going to see high temperatures potentially in not getting out of the single digits in some of these areas here, and then that shifts over again to the east as we get on into Friday. It's going to be very cold for this time of year. As a matter of fact, if we go up here and take a look at it, you can actually see cold air, big purple colors. These are 30, maybe 40 degrees eventually below normal. This is at 850 millibars, so it's going to be very cold at the surface, and you can see that cold shot just swings through Friday into Saturday into the weekend. We start Sunday and Monday, another blast of cold air. It almost makes you kind of immune to these green colors because you're watching the purple colors, but the green colors are very cold. This is very cold air, folks. So, and warm out west, unfortunately, if you're looking for snow out there, you got to wait a bit. And here comes another cold blast into the east by the time we get to day 10. And there's really no point in looking past day 10 on the operational models or even the ensembles like we're looking at here. They've just been warm. They want to go to La Nina Climo, and we're seeing the atmosphere refuse to do that. So we're seeing a correction back. Here's your stratosphere. Now look at this. You got a stratospheric warming event going on. There's a circle here. I don't know if you can see it. I'll draw it, but this is your circle. It's a stratospheric vortex right there. You see that? Okay. Now watch what happens. We're way up at 50 millibars. This is way up in the atmosphere. It gets stretched and stretched and stretched. You see this big blue area here over North America. That PV is getting stretched. You start to see a lobe of it here. Another circle kind of developing. This is way on out in time. This is European AI, and it continues to keep that vortex stretched and present a lot of that lobe of the polar vortex over the North American continent up here in Canada. That puts the coldest air of the northern hemisphere on our side of the world, which is good if you want to have winter over here. And it just sort of keeps it in place as we go on through the end of the run. So that is a signal for not getting a big warm up in the United States anytime soon. You got a stretched PV and got good phase 8 in terms of the MJO and all of that good stuff, my friends. So a lot of signals lining up for cold. This is, let's go back here. This is your day 2 max temperatures. This is for tomorrow. High temperatures, again, not getting out of the single digits in some of these areas where it's light blue here, that's below freezing, and you get into the 50s here in the southeast, 60s and 70s, but much of the northern portion of the country is very warm. Temperatures tonight, look at this, below 0 and even approaching minus 15 in some of these areas up here from the Dakotas into Iowa toward the western Great Lakes. My goodness, that's cold. And then 20s and teens for everybody else. These are 20s and 30s down here to the southeast, but cold. Look at this. This is a tundra for the United States for early December, and then very warm in Florida. And then as we go on out to the next day, I was a day behind. There we go. Friday. There's Friday's highs, not getting above freezing across much of the northern tier, and then very, very chilly down here with rain and possibly some freezing rain, sleet, and snow in parts of the Carolinas, keeping us very cool and feeling like winter down here, very warm in Florida. And then overnight lows will be again on Friday morning. When you wake up, it's going to be extremely cold up here in the north. That's why we have a shot at winter weather down here. You've got a big, brutally cold air mass that we're dealing with, okay? So that's what we're looking at, my friends. So 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. Woo boy, oh boy, oh boy. Typical La Nina kind of look in, and almost would be cooler up here and then warmer across the south, but we've got a sort of a northwesterly flow keeping us cold, bisecting the country. Northeast cold, southwest warm, and precipitation a little bit more above across the north, where we're getting those systems kind of tracking along and seeing some clipper action, and below across the south till you get down to South Texas and Florida, Hawaii above, and Alaska below. Last but not least, hate to keep us on the video too long, but you got to know about this. We're expecting G2 storm conditions. We've been in G3 storm conditions. Look at this. It went all the way up to G3. We're expecting G2. We got to G3. Coronal hole and stream is hitting our magnetosphere. Plus, we had a CME. Now, we've got a big cluster of sunspots over here. These things are big and they are ugly, my friends, but they could produce solar flaring in the next several days, and that could interfere with the magnetosphere again, put us in pretty major geomagnetic storm conditions. The potential is there for that. In the meantime, right now, what we've got is going to produce aurora tonight, so you may be able to see that across the northern portion of the country. Look out for it. There are those big sunspots. Look at this. This one and this one. Got a couple of ones that are not even all that small entering the fray over here on the western limb. But look at this big one here. Oh my goodness, look at that. Blues, reds, reds, blues, reds. I mean, this is a complex and very, very large. It's much, much, much larger than planet Earth. And that is one. Here is the other right on its heels. Look at this, just big and complex. And you've already, if you take a look at certain views, you can kind of see the umbra here and see these filaments about ready to snap. And if they do, they could destabilize the sunspot. You get a big solar flare. So these could produce some biggies over the next couple of days. They're rotating in toward us. We will keep our eyes on it. And that, my friends, is the show. I hope it's been enjoyable. I hope you've learned a few things, and tell your friends about us, and send some people over here if you know people interested in the weather. I look at it every day, and I track all the models. Been tracking weather for over 40 years, and I love winter weather. Been watching the winter unfold in North Carolina, of course, across the United States for that long of a period of time. I've been interested in it. So I will put that knowledge to use as we continue to progress through winter. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for the support. Hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, and leave a comment. Let me know if you're seeing snow, if you want to see snow, what you are expecting where you are, and if you've got any thoughts or questions about anything I've said, let me know that too. And also, if there's anything I can be in prayer about and support you, please let me know. I pray for you guys every day, and I really appreciate your support. That's it. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless.